speech. You're on mute, Dad.
Yes, I lost myself here. Good morning, fellow Toastmasters, and welcome to our
Morning.
good morning. And thank you, Dan, for that great introduction. Yeah, I've known you all your life. That's true. Mr. Toastmaster, fellow Toastmasters, welcome. Yes. Close your eyes for maybe 5 seconds. I want you to think about somebody who's been really important in your life, somebody who led your life, somebody you think of has had a great impact. So take 5 seconds, maybe 10, and just think in history in your mind what it is, who it is that person is. Perhaps it was your mother, maybe it was your father, maybe it was a sibling, or maybe it was a teacher, a religious leader, or maybe a politician. Whoever comes to your mind, think about that in the rest of the speech. The person that comes to my mind, the one is someone who had a zest for life. It was my father, my dad, Papa. Papa had an impact in my life in many ways. Here are three. He loved music, particularly opera and barbershop. He was also into classical music, played piano. I learned to play guitar, not guitar, but trombone. He was a worker. He had to supply funds for his family, keep his family working, and he was creative. And so, with those things in mind, I'm going to talk about my father, Papa. Music was a big item in Papa's life. He was a church choir singer. He sang in the opera chorus for the Portland Opera Association, along with my mom in that case. And also, he was in the barbershop quartet singing. He was an active member, very active member of Sped Squaw. Now, everybody knows what Sped Squaw is. Well, Sped Squaw is the Society for the Preservation and Encouragement of Barbershop Quartet Singing in America. His love for music was contagious. And I started to sing in groups beginning in grade school, second grade actually, and I have sung ever since for the last 70 years. Papa brought music alive to my life. Now, although Papa died 65 years ago, his many years of working in the Portland schools, Portland railroads, he provided a good funds for his family. It was great on being able to provide food, go on family trips. We take Sunday drives often, go to the beach just to travel around. And I learned from him his work ethic, to work for money. And so during the summertime, I would go out to the berry fields in the Portland area and pick berries, strawberries usually, but sometimes raspberries. And I love strawberries. I actually would eat more than I would get paid for, but that's okay. As a kid, you wanted to learn money. I also had a paper route as I grew up in grade school, and that helped me earn money to buy stuff. And one of the things I did buy was a camera. I'll talk about that later. But I loved it when I was in grade school when Mama would take me down to the train railroads where Papa worked. Now, Papa worked Sunday through Friday. So Sunday was a good day to go down to the rail yards and maybe see Papa. And was enjoyed walking between the rail cars, the freight cars that are sitting on the side of the tracks. And what I really loved to hear was listening to the giant steam engines, the locomotives, they hiss and they sputter as they otherwise laid quietly on the track, waiting to be called to action. And then I love watching the passenger trains carrying people going down the road, down the railroad, and freight trains with the many, many freight cars as they went rumbling down the tracks. And I thought of Papa about his love for working for the railroad. Now, that wasn't his only thing, because Papa it was one thing, important thing that Papa was able to do is get us rail passes, and we would go on frequent short trips. We go to Seattle, Baker, Oregon, a small town in Eastern Oregon, on the train, and a couple times we went to his hometown. He was from St. Paul, Minnesota, and I loved getting on the train because it was a 3-day trip. There was a sleeper car, there was a dome car, there was a dining car. It was great for a kid who is in grade school still. The 3-day trip went through Oregon, Washington, California. Well, I didn't get to California, excuse me, Colorado and Montana, and then finally it rolled into the train station at St. Paul, Minnesota. Now, Papa seemed to have other aspirations as well. He was someone who was able to do things that just seemed out of the ordinary, and I learned that from him as well. He had a workshop in the basement of our 53rd Street in Portland, Oregon. And in that workshop, there was a usual table saw, the workbench, and other tools. He had electronic testing equipment, which he also included an oscillator, which you may not know, have heard of. It's a little screen that showed sine waves when you try to check, well, what's the voltage? You could see it on a screen. Nowadays, you see it on digitally. Tube tester. He had a soldering iron, put electronic pieces together. He'd make things up. He'd create things. He'd read popular electronics and make something. From that, he was very creative and inspiring. And from that, I learned how to be inspiring as well. That inventive gene was passed on to me in the way, though, in photography, because I learned how to be a photographer by being inventive, by looking at a scene and saying, oh, that's just a plain rock. But if you take a picture of it in the right way, it becomes alive. It starts living. It starts becoming, it's creative. And so with learning those three things from my father, I was able to go on in life, become creative, and learn things and do things. Remember at the beginning of the speech that I asked you if you could think about someone who was who inspired you, someone whom you admired. Was it some famous leader, or was it an articulate book writer that you really love? Or was it about international news or somebody who was able to broadcast news to you? Well, these leaders that you may have had in mind may be important. The one person who I remember as having been the most important part in my life and having the best impact was in my life was Papa, Mr. Toastmaster.